We live in a culture where, in a lot of Christian circles, the thought is you really can't say anything about politics because that needs to be kept separate. Where do we get that idea? For the next few times we're together, I want to talk about what Scripture says about individuals that are in charge. And before somebody says, well, we really can't do that today, Jesus did it. Luke chapter 13, beginning in verse 31. Some Pharisees came saying to Jesus, "Get out, depart from here, for Herod wants to kill you." Jesus says to them in verse 32, "Go tell that fox, behold, I cast out demons and perform cures today, and tomorrow and the third day I shall be perfected." Go tell that fox. Linsky, in his commentary on the Gospel of Luke, writes this: to call a king that fox is to defy him into whatever threats he makes. Jesus notifies Herod and also these Pharisees that he will not for one moment change his course because of any power of man. No force in humanity is going to stop him from the purpose he has on this earth. And that really should be kind of the edict that we follow as well. So I said, well, now wait a minute, you really can't talk about people in power. Why not? Jesus did. For the time we have together today, and then I want to continue it in the same chapter the next few times we are together, the statements that you find in Proverbs chapter 29, and see if they fit some of the things that are happening around us today. Verse 1, "He who is often rebuked and hardens his neck will suddenly be destroyed, and that without remedy." Now think about the situation that is pictured. He who is often rebuked, corrected, told there's a better solution, your solution didn't work, you created a bigger problem, let's find ways to solve it. He who is often rebuked and hardens his neck. Scripture refers to people that have a stiffened neck, stiff-necked people. Or you could refer to them as hard-hearted people. That's the kind of individual described here. This person will suddenly be destroyed, and that without remedy. Not going to go down in history as a great individual. Verse number 2, "When the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. But when a wicked man rules, the people groan." Why? He makes their burdens more difficult. There's a great example of this back in 1 Kings. It's chapter 12. A son of Solomon named Rehoboam is going to take over as king over Israel after Solomon is gone. And he talks to the advisors that were around Solomon and asks, "What shall we do?" And they cautioned him. They talked about the great works that Solomon undertook, the great buildings that were built, the temple that was built, for example. But it came at a price. And they admonished Rehoboam to be easier. In fact, in verse 4, "Your father made our yoke heavy. Now therefore lighten the burdensome service of your father and this heavy yoke which he put on us, and we will serve you. If you actually treat us right, we'll follow you wherever you go." Well, he listens to the older advisors, and then he goes and talks to those who grew up with him. Verse number 8. "He rejected the advice which the elders had given him, and consulted the young men who had grown up with him, who stood with him. And what they said was, you just make it harder." Verse number 11, he comes back and tells the nation of Israel, "Whereas my father put a heavy yoke on you, I will add to your yoke. My father chastised you with whips, I will chastise you with scourges." He said, "My little finger will be thicker than my father's waist." You haven't seen anything as far as power goes. Power hungry, prideful, ignorant of how to deal with people, all of the above. And as a result, 10 of those 12 tribes of Israel revolt against Rehoboam. And then you have a divided kingdom, Israel with 10 tribes in the north, and Judah under the rule of Rehoboam with 2 tribes in the south. What's the problem? Go back to Proverbs. "When the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice, but when a wicked man rules, the people groan." You think back across your lifetime, have you seen that happen? Do you see it happening now? Verse number 3, whoever loves wisdom makes his father rejoice, but a companion of harlots wastes his wealth. Interesting observation. Verse number 4, the king establishes the land by justice, but he who receives bribes overthrows it. And it's the opposite of justice. So now you have a comparison. The person that would listen to advice versus the person who thinks he is always right and listens to people that have no kind of expertise in the areas in which they are put in charge. Sound familiar? When somebody who is trying to do what is right rules, the people rejoice. But when a wicked man rules, the people groan. Sound familiar? Whoever loves wisdom makes his father rejoice, but a companion of harlots, prostitutes, wastes his wealth. Sound familiar? The king establishes the land by justice, but he who receives bribes overthrows it. If I'm not really honest in dealing with the nation that I oversee, because of a conflict of interest that lies elsewhere, outside those people that have been given into my charge, what's going to happen? Bribery, other problems will cause the overthrow of the nation that I say I love, when my actions show something totally different. Self-serving leadership unconcerned with the masses of people under that leadership, has been written about time and time again for centuries. And the end result's always the same. The problem hasn't changed, whether it's back then, a couple of thousand years ago, several thousand years ago, or today. Because Proverbs 29 doesn't sound far off at all from where we are right now. Please stay safe. We'll talk again soon.